Hello, gang. Professor McElroy here. We're in week 2 of Web Design 2, January 2023 section. Tonight, we're going to cover a bunch of different topics. Week 1 was all about kind of getting comfortable in Adobe Dreamweaver, connecting through our site management system in Dreamweaver, taking a look at the Bootstrap responsive website template process by opening up a new template that Adobe Dreamweaver had in its library, and kind of taking a look at, what we could edit in the index or the homepage versus CSS, taking a look at the complexity of the scalability of the site and how it goes from primary navigation running along the top of the page to more of an accordion drop down once it reached a certain pixel kind of breakdown in our browser, so that our site was responsive, whether it was on a phone or on a tablet or on a desktop. And then we went in and downloaded my lesson 1 file, the pizza zip file, and we went in and started doing some edits from a file that was constructed in a responsive environment. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about image resampling. We're going to cover CSS side of Adobe Dreamweaver, and particularly responsive website design templates, site files. We're going to take a look at the files that I've created, kind of deconstruct a little bit, talk about where things are found and how they're constructed. We're going to take a look at the CSS Designer palette in Dreamweaver, so we can take a look at where things are labeled and how they break down and how you can edit them in a menu environment. We're going to take that week 1 lecture file from scratch. You can use the file that you've already been kind of playing around with a little bit. I'm going to start from scratch because I'm going to do some image resizing. We're going to add buttons to our navigation. We're going to go into CSS and change some color and sizes and remove some drop shadows and different things like that from our file. I'm going to do everything in my index file and kind of set everything up. So when I kind of duplicate my pages and add the additional pages to make it a 5-page website template, we'll have all the elements we need to populate. This week, we're going to kind of go through the entire construction process in our lecture, cover a bunch of different topics, best practices, things I like to do in web design, kind of the stages of my process. And then next week, I'm going to introduce us to the file that we'll be using for our final out-of-book project. So next week, we'll be constructing a totally different template, different look and feel, different navigation, and start to get you comfortable with where things are, no matter what the file is, no matter what the template is, or no matter what software application you're using. If it's WordPress, it's still a CSS environment. You're still editing the style sheets and manipulating the template from a front end standpoint. And it does it in a very similar way from a code standpoint. Just looks a little bit different, but the stuff is in the same place. The code, the content, the stuff you need to edit, it's in the same place. You just got to know where to look for it to kind of edit and manipulate it. So we'll do a lot tonight. I'm going to try to keep the lecture to 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Try to kind of wrap it up at 9, just a little after 9, something like that. Depends on the process, kind of how we can navigate through and kind of highlight some things that I want to highlight tonight. Remember, it's a live Zoom. I'll be recording it. I'll be posting the link later this evening once it posts, and we'll be able to watch it over and over again as we wish to do so. So let's get started here. I'm going to go back into my announcement section. I'm going to go in and re-download my lecture 1 files. I'm just going to start from scratch. That way, we're kind of editing everything kind of from the bare bones again, a little bit as a reinforcer and a little bit kind of the process to go through when you're doing it all in one swoop. So I'm going to kind of do it from the ground up again. So first thing I'm going to do is unzip that. I'm going to go in here and rename this file. It's all the same files from week 1 as you recognize them. I'm going to do a little sample for a little speakeasy in Bonita Springs. I always like these small businesses, these kind of little behind, kind of off the beaten path places that we can kind of do as projects because they're fun and a little bit different. It gives us an opportunity to play around, see what other people are doing. They have a website. It's not a great one. I believe they built theirs in GoDaddy, but we're going to navigate through a little bit and play tonight so we can cover some topics. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Dreamweaver, right? I'm going to go into Dreamweaver. I'm going to hide my navigation bar up here because this little thing drives me crazy when I'm trying to navigate. Okay, so we're going to go into site, new site. And right, I'm just redoing the process, and it's going to be quick just so that everyone remembers, comfortable with the process and how it works. And we're going to go in now, and remember that when you do a new site, it loads it over here. I also like to do a quick preview. Like whenever I'm working on a site for a client, I'll open it up in a browser first and be like, okay, this is what this thing looks like. I got navigation. I have my menu bar expanded out. I have my gallery here, right? I have this image behind everything, kind of like my wallpaper to my body area of my content. I kind of have these headers. I kind of take a look at it. See, there's a glow here. So I got to remember that the background's black. Some of the basic things that this thing is constructed in. Then I have my hour story. Then I have my little column here broken down, my row with 3 columns with some things. I have a separate kind of image area back behind there. And I have my crumbs or footer area. So I like to take a quick peek at it as I'm kind of navigating through, just so I remember what it looks like and kind of things I'm looking for as I'm kind of navigating. Oh, one thing I wanted to highlight was, when I go looking through and it has things like this, a gallery, and I'm like, these are the images. Okay, this is what I got. I've got 3 images in my gallery, so I need to remember that as I'm kind of building and navigating. So I'm going to go into my images, and I'm going to turn them on as icons so I can kind of see what I have going on here, right? And so we have these cards. My 3 cards is what I'm calling it. So if you go back real quick and you open up your page, you'll see these are my 3 cards. So that's a good thing to know as I'm navigating. So I've got 3 cards, 1, 2, and 3. I have my pizza back, which is like that main image behind everything. I've got my slider images, right? These are the images for my gallery. So trying to name things in a way that I know what they are as I start to kind of build and process things like slider images for galleries, card image for if I'm doing like a catalog of things, and then naming something like a BG, a background, something so I can remember that element. Of course, logo, you have placeholders here, right? So there's my carousel placeholder. Here is just a image kind of thumbnail, kind of square. I try to do things in square format as a space holder, and then just the standard small size. So I kind of know what I have going on here. You'll notice it's 850 by 400. My sliders images I have is 800 by 450. I'm actually going to make those a little bit bigger as we kind of build our gallery because I did those as space holders, and you'll actually notice up here that they don't fill to more of the 1024 by 768 kind of format. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make some adjustments to those. I'm going to make those a little bit more 1100 or 1024 in width. But questions about image manipulation, image replacement, kind of as you're taking one template and constructing another. Of course, I use Photoshop for any raster-based image manipulation. Just because I use Photoshop, that's not necessarily a thing. It's not what you have to use. There's lots of image applications out there that do resizing, image cropping, filter effects, things like that. Really, as long as you can do image sizing and image cropping, any program that does that, you can take kind of your layout, what you're thinking about, what you're expecting, and kind of resize and repopulate things based on that really easily. So I'm going to show you like some of my best practices as we manipulate images, and then we get into doing CSS editing and doing some of the template editing, just so that we're kind of all thinking the same way, processing the same way when we're taking something and constructing it or reconstructing it. And we know this is going to be about a 5-page website when we're all done with it. So just kind of keep that in mind. So the first thing I got to deal with is I got to deal with my sliders, right? My gallery slides. That's the first thing that you see on my page that jumps out at you in my template, like my main image slides. So I've got to open those things up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. And I'm going to drag down to Photoshop. And I'm going to launch my Photoshop here real quick, because you're going to see they're all 800 by 450. And I just did that as a general rule of thumb. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to construct my template as, but I knew that I needed to set a template up, set something up for you guys. So the first thing I like to do is I know that these are the images space holders, right? They're 450 tall and they're about 850 wide, right? And I need to make those a little bit bigger. So let's go into image size. And you'll notice that I'm going to change this to pixels. First thing I got to do is I've got to make sure that I make a release copy of this. So I'll do select all, edit select all, Command A, copy, delete with a white background and Command V. So all I'm doing is kind of taking this thing and making it a little bit better format for me. I'm releasing it from its background. I also could have done a layer from background by right-clicking on it, and it would have given me layer 0, right? It would have done any of those things for me. And I need to do this. I need to do image canvas size. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make this 1024. And I'm going to do that because I think I want to make my gallery width a little bit wider in order to fill in the spaces I have around the edges here a little bit. So I'm going to do 1024 and see if that works out for me. So I could use this as my template now, right? This is slider 2. I need slider 1 and slider 2 and slider 3 all to be the same proportion. And I need to go out and find another image, right? So this is just a space holder for me. You can see it right there. This is just a space holder for me. I need to fill this space. I need to make it everything the exact same proportion. So the first thing I got to do is I got to go out and find some images. So I'm going to go out to my file, new window. And I'm actually going to type in Chartreuse Bonita. It's kind of this speakeasy style place. And I'm just going to play around with this a little bit because it's kind of a funky little place, kind of off the beaten path. And I'm going to see if I can find some images that I can use for my gallery. We have some of the cocktail guys here. So let's see what we have as far as images we can grab. Here's a 1440. Let's see if that one's an actual JPEG. It is. Let's see if we can find that 600. That's not going to really work. 3000. That's a really good one. So let's see if we can get into the web and actually find this image. See if, oh, it's a Naples Daily News image. So let's see what we have for getting things of decent size. So I'm just kind of going in here and seeing what image sizes I have. I need something good quality, good size. So let's see about this one. That's the thumbnail. So let's see if we have it here on the page. I'm just going to navigate through and see if I can grab a few pictures. So there's a really nice one, really big. This is their Facebook page. And let's just see. So I've got 2. Let me see if I can find another one that looks, looks to fit the part of my gallery. Like I have the interiors, I have some drinks. Let's just see what we have from a pixel standpoint. Let's see. This is the picture of the building. So let's close that. Oh. Won't let me grab that. Let me see if I can go in here, see if it'll let me open it. All right. That's a good one. All right, so for now, I'm just gonna close that. And we're gonna start playing around with some textures and some different things, but I'm gonna go in here now and I'm gonna open up my first image, which is this one. I'm gonna select all, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna bring it into slider 2 and paste it, and you're gonna notice that it is enormous. And so now I gotta deal with making this thing fill my new format. And so I'm just gonna scale that up. And I'm gonna click that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and file, save as this thing. And I'm gonna save it over into my images folder, and I'm gonna call it slider gallery. So now that I can set this thing up, I'm actually gonna get all 3 of my images into one Photoshop file. So I'm gonna go in and file open. Let's go to the desktop, and then I need image number 2. I'm gonna do select all and copy, and then paste. And I'm gonna hold down my Option key. I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger. Turn off my transform controls. So now you'll see that I have that one and that one all set up. And I'm gonna do the building as my last one. So I'm gonna do file open. I'm gonna grab that building image. It's not the most attractive building, I have to say. But it'll do for the demonstration purposes. Do that. All right, so I'm going to hide that and hide that. So I have my slider file set up, and I'm going to do a file save as to my computer. And I'm going to make this a PNG file, and I'm going to name this slider 1.png. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to do file save as. Oh, first I need to turn off that layer, and I'm going to turn on layer number 2, and I'm going to do file save as. And the reason I did PNG, it's just a little better quality. So I'm going to set this one up as a PNG, and I'm going to call it slider 2.png and save that. Now I know they're made off the exact same file, right? And then do file save as. I'm going to dump it in my images gallery, a PNG, and I'm going to do slider 3. And so now I have my gallery file set up. So that's what I'll start with first. So I'm going to close these, close these, close these, right? And I need to do that for my other ones too, my cards, which are 800 by 450. And remember from our template, if I scroll down, the cards, they look pretty good. They have a border around them. I might decide not to do that, but they're sampled down to the right size. They're proportionate. Same with my story image here, which is the slice of pizza. And so I can minimize this. And we have our 3 cards. We have our slice of pizza, which is also slider 1. So that'll kind of rescale itself down. I might actually change the proportions of that and make a version of what I'm trying to do, 800 by 450, but I'll have to change it in the code, right? So that was my carousel placeholder. And this is right, my card placeholder, just so I kind of know. These were little gray. Sometimes I'll do gray boxes. I won't even put pixels or anything in them. Sometimes I'll do different color swatches inside of Photoshop. So I'll make a green one for the card holders. I'll make like a blue one for the gallery or the carousel. And then I'll make like a gray one for that background image, right? So then I can really tell based on my template when I turn those on and I relabel those in my code, whether they fill proportionately the way I want, they're kind of doing what I want. And so I'll do them color coded too, if I'm not building them based on some client template they had or something like that. And you'll notice beer 1, beer 2, beer 3, those are slider images too. So I'm going to have to do something with those as I make new pages, but I at least start to sample, right? So as long as I understand the idea of image size and kind of making this the right proportion for what I need, right? The right proportion. And I know image canvas side, and that way I can crop things based on, what I need it to do. I can use that template and just import images into new layers and kind of format them as I need them to be formatted. But if I'm doing multiple image of the same size, you want to make sure you set up your Photoshop file with the same file with multiple layers based on what you're exporting. And I would actually go in here and name each layer. So this one, slider 1, this one, slider 2, and this one, slider 3. And I would trash this one, which was my original slider image. And then I have my file all set up. If I ever have to go in and make any adjustments, I can make them based on my file format. And so that's a really good best practice. I use Photoshop as long as you have an image size and an image crop kind of technique, and you know the pixel dimensions of the images that are your space holders. More times than not, you'll work for a company or a client where they already have something. And so you just got to go in, open up the images that currently hold the space of the images you want to replace them in, take a look at the properties of them by going into the image size or right clicking the image and getting the info on the image so you know how wide and how tall it is, because you really want to stay in the proportion of what you're trying to develop. And last week, week 1, I talked a lot about you can do a Google search for Bootstrap templates, website templates, and there are just hundreds out there. And you might actually find something you want to play around with and download that's free that you can bring into Dreamweaver, and it may already have a really nice look and feel of something you want to recreate or something you want to modify from. And if you have kind of a working template that already has image space holders, it's really easy to find new images, take new images, and resize them based on the application. But using terminology like background images, slider images, card images, carousel images, a way for you to know when you save them into the images folder what they're for, it really helps the process as you're constructing. And Photoshop's a really great tool for that, but it's not really the end all be all. Not everyone uses Adobe CC. Some use other HTML editing programs, and they use a basic photo program that's native to their application, or maybe they downloaded a free app or something like that. You just have to understand image size and canvas size or crop size so that you make sure that all your images are built in the exact same proportion, exact same space holders. That way, if you're building from scratch or you're replacing, everything is a little bit more seamless in the process. So, and I went in there and renamed my things so that I know, and I always like to do date modified just so that I know what is today's, what I created. We're obviously going to have to do something here with my pizza back image, because that's the one that's behind the scenes of everything. And so I'm going to need to make something that goes back there. So I think while I'm doing some image resizing, I'll talk a little bit about layers, even in a multimedia world, in a website, a multimedia and animation, there still is a background, a middle ground, and a foreground, right? So you're trying to construct things that make sense based on the layers you're trying to create. And so for me, oftentimes, website backgrounds are white, they're a solid color, or they're a texture of some kind. I like to use soft textures because that gives the illusion of three-dimensional space, even though the web is a two-dimensional plane. And so I like to spend a lot of time kind of creating this false idea of three-dimensional space. And so I'm just going to open up this background image. So this time I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to do layer from background. And we'll just call this texture BG, or texture background. And so this is going to be the beginning of kind of my background image that I'm going to use as part of my new redesign of the template we're manipulating or working on. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go in. I'm just going to look for something earth texture. So let's just see what I can find from an earth texture standpoint, or nature texture. I think a better word is like nature texture. And look at all of these. The thing about this place is it kind of is this kind of speakeasy, very earth tony, greens, browns, leathers, textures, that kind of thing. So I thought it would be neat if we created something that was a little more texture in nature. And now that I'm thinking about it, I bet I can find a much larger texture in my free Pexels image kind of file. So let's see what we have here. We got all kinds of kind of beautiful greens and textures, and this one's beautiful. I'm going to download this. And I'm going to drag this over, and I'm just going to name it, just to keep with the same terminology, I'm going to dump that to the desktop. Let's minimize this for a second. I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to bring it into my, I don't need my slider gallery open anymore. I'll save it, and then I'll paste this in. And so now I've got this beautiful image that's all nature texture. And if I zoom out and turn on my transforms, look how big that is. It's enormous. I'm going to scale it down a little bit, but I'm going to leave some wiggle room around the edges for this image, because you never know when I might need to make that background graphic a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go in and do a new save as, and I'm going to do texture back or texture background. I'm going to name it as, save it as Photoshop file, and I'm going to go in now and do a file save as, and save it as a PNG, and I'm just going to name it texture back PNG. And so now I've got a couple of image elements to work with. And now you're starting to see kind of my thought process, how things work. I have my sliders in PNG 1, 2, and 3. I have my texture back. Those are all parts of my index front end part of my design that I can manipulate. And we'll take a look at that, and we'll get into the CSS and manipulate that a little bit. So let's go ahead and minimize that for the time being. Let's see what I have out here stuck on the desktop. These are all the original source files. Remember, they're in Photoshop layers now. So I'm going to go ahead and trash those. And knowing that my images file has my PSD files and has all the layers of the images and what I did with them. So now I can get in here. And so for the time being, I'm going to close Pexels. I'll probably have to go in there a little bit later. But now we know I have my slider images. I have my background graphic, which you can see right there, right? Body back, basically, which is my image. And then I have these little Our Story image, these little card holders, and I have a background graphic back here. So we're going to go in now, and we're going to set up our template now a little bit better now that we kind of have a plan and we went through the basics last week. So I'm going to do a lot of like kind of recap, and then I'm going to add to it, because this will be a really good lecture for you to watch later as kind of a recording or rerun. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to go in here and I'm going to get rid of my beer HTML file, because I'm going to go in now and construct my template for all of the basic elements I need for my 5-page website. So I'm going to start with my index file and get that all structured, and then I'll be able to get in and kind of pre-populate or repopulate that, right? And we have our drop-down menu. We have our slices and mugs. So I'm going to do a few things like I did last week, and then I'm going to add on to them. So I'm going to kind of reorganize my thing I got going on here, because I'm going to need the designer eventually. I'm going to need some different things, but I'll start here with this and expand a couple of the elements I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is let me go in and find the Chartreuse website, because I want to be able to do all this thing based on the material that they have. So this is their site. I'm going to minimize this. You scroll down. They have some nice images. They actually have some images. Hey, do you recognize this one? They have some images that I'll be able to use, I think, as I'm constructing this thing. Some great interviews, things like that. But if I scroll down, you'll notice it's powered by GoDaddy. So they used a template just like a Wix or a WordPress environment like we were talking about. I'm actually going to probably take a few of these images and stuff as I start to populate. And so I'm going to grab that first, and I'm going to do this a lot quicker now because we did kind of that first lecture, and this is the title for our page. So I'm going to copy that first, and I'm going to get in. I'm going to edit everything on the front end first. So we're just going to scroll through real quick. And you'll notice a lot of this stuff. I'm going to edit some of that other stuff later, but let's get in here. And our nav bar has our name. I'm going to paste the whole name, but I'm only going to use chartreuse. And so let's get rid of that. And now we're going to get in here, and I'm going to show you some things about the whole navigation process here, because we're going to need to add more navigation items. We currently only have 2 buttons, if you remember that, right? We have home and beer. And when I shrink it down, right, it goes into accordion menu, and there it is. And you'll also kind of notice home is dark and beer is grayed out. The reason that is because you might have noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, the word active added to our class ID in our home button. And that just means make that one black and make the other items gray. So I'm going to do home. I'm going to do, so we need 5 pages, right? So the second page, I'm going to do about. And me having built lots and lots of websites over the years, I'm going to go ahead and name my HTML files, because I'll already know what my pages are going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to drop in another button. You'll notice I did not copy the active descriptor, because I'm going to have to remove that and add it to the class items of the pages that I have open. So when I open up the about.html page, I want to move this little tag that says active and remove it from home and move it to about next to nav item, so that this class is moved down here and this class is moved up there. So hopefully that makes sense. So every time I create a new HTML page, I'm going to turn on the active link and gray out the other ones. So as you click on the navigational buttons, the one you're currently on will be black. The ones that you need to navigate to will be grayed out, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to go in, and so they have menu, events, contact, bartenders, all these different pages. So I think there definitely needs to be an about. I think there needs to be a bartender. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Contact will be our last page. So we need to copy this and drop another tag in. So I need to make sure this says bartender, right? Very, very consistent of page naming. All right, so we have, they don't really have, I got to be honest, they have a menu, but it changes all the times. But house rules is a really funny one, because they list all the things that how you should behave. So we're going to name that house rules. And you'll notice I'm doing case sensitivity, right? Upper and lower case for the navigation that needs it, the button names, and then and then we'll do contact. And I'm double checking any kind of typography, any errors in my type, anything like that as I'm navigating through. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, minimize this for a minute. Let's go in and find our page and refresh it. And here are, see how it's grayed out, and that one's home, and everything else is grayed out. And if I check my menu, there they are. See how they roll over. And so we're in good shape. I'm able to set up my navigation for the beginning of my page exactly the way I want it. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. You'll see that the nav is closed. And this is where you should start noticing things like IDs. So you're going to see this carousel example indicator ID, right? And it's a data carousel. The reason that's important is I'm actually going to show you that these things are labeled in our CSS. And so you'll actually see that the navigation panel, so we have our HTML, we have our head, we have our container here, and our container body area has all of these things: container fluid, nav bar, carousel, jumbotron, which is technically the our story area of our image. Right here, slices and mugs, get sauced. Scroll down. We have our story. We have our rows set up, and we have our footer. And so a lot of these are actually pre-classified. And when I click on them and I kind of minimize a few things and maximize a few things so you can see where they're located, all the scripting is written right in here and labeled in our index file pointing to our CSS. So just kind of keep that in mind, because we're going to bounce back and forth when we get into our different elements of our CSS. So slider JPEG is slider PNG. And so now you'll notice that image. And so I'm just going to save that. And I like to do that. I like to save and refresh inside my browser so I can see what is going on. And so you see now this image fills all the way to the edge. But if I click here, it goes back to the short-sided, right? It's not perfect yet. And so now I know at least I'm on the right scale. My proportions are correct in my Photoshop file for the images that I'm replacing. And so now let's go back into, let me just see, this is bartenders. And so Carlos is the name of the guy, I think, in that photo. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go in. Now I'm an HTML guy, right? And you learn that from Web 1. I like to create a lot of my code side in my designs. Like, I'm a code guy. I could have gone up here and highlighted that and changed it, but I like to strip all of the HTML out of anything I'm copying from web or anything like that. And so I like to use the HTML side, the scripting side, the code side of the page. And I'm just going to highlight this, minimize that for a minute. And so each one of my images, we're going to talk about the things that we have going on here. So there's slider number 1. And so now when I go to slider number 2, PNG, and you'll notice that it gets a lot easier when you are naming the same things, right? Like you're using the same terminology, because now I can easily go in. And so now let's take a quick peek, right? Slider 2. That's the bar itself, and slider 3 is the outside. And so I want to say something about the location and also the interior in my descriptors. So I don't even need to see the image as a gallery, because I already know slider number 2 is the interior of my image. So let's go into here and let's just see what it says about this place. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to make number 2, just saying its name again, and then my tag. And so you'll notice I'm just bouncing around. I kind of have a good idea of what I want to do. Bonita's first and only craft cocktail bar. So I'm going to copy that, minimize that, get in here, and I'm going to paste that. And every once in a while, I just save it, Command S, just to make sure I have everything going the way I want. And this is PNG. Oh, typo. PNG. All right, replace that. All right, so my header, maybe I'll do, so let's take a look, see what they have here. We need to talk about reservations, right? There's a couple of things they talk about here. So let's just make sure there isn't anything. I'm just kind of taking a pick and seeing what, maybe my header will be a little bit about the joint. So here's my header, and this is all space holder, right? So I'm just pasting that in there. And let's see if there's anything. I want it to be about the community, right? So let's see. Bonita Springs Historic District, because that's where it's located. So I'm going to put that as my little paragraph text. I'm going to go ahead and save it. I'm going to go back into here, hit the whole refresh. And so Now you'll see that my gallery is good to go from an image standpoint. Everything is expanded, everything is full. My menu has all the buttons that I need. So I'm just going to start constructing this thing so you can kind of see the texture and how it works. All right, so now we're going to scroll down a little bit, right? And these are the commands for my carousel. So I'm going to leave that, but I am going to scroll down because I've got some space holder things to deal with here. Here's the logo.png, which is right here. Now, Chartreuse, they don't have a logo per se. So let's see here. I think I'm actually going to, I think I'm going to take this martini glass and I'm going to make it their logo. Because I think it would be cool if their logo was actually a martini glass. So I'm going to go in here now and I'm going to go in Photoshop. And I'm just kind of constructing this thing. I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to find the space holder that is the logo. So here it is. And then I'm going to open up my martini. Oh, this one is a web file. So I got to go back. And I'm just going to do a quick screenshot. Command S and the number 4 on an Apple computer will give me a screenshot of it. So I'm just kind of swiping a version of it for the sake of the lecture. Select all, copy, paste. So there it is. I'm just going to hold down the Option key and scale it up a little bit. And now I'm going to do File, Save As. And I don't really want that logo that is currently in there. So let's just see. I'm just going to replace it. And that way I can refresh this and I'll be good to go. So I replace that. I need to get in here. So you'll notice that 200 by 204 rounded circle. We talked about that last week. Let's go in and replace this. And so it's fine that it goes on 2 lines. I'm actually going to, let's do craft cocktails just to clean this thing up a little bit. Craft cocktail bar, that's good. Okay, so get sauce, that's not going to work for us. So let's find 30s old Florida swanky vibe. Paste that in. I'm going to use 30s swanky vibe. Case sensitivity, capital S, capital V. And even though I could use more words, I want to really try to stick with the template concept that I had constructed, right? The theme, the structure. Beautiful Bonita Springs. And some of you did, well, just about all, I think all of you did really good with just doing this basic modification. We're just going to take it a little step further because we're dealing with some different elements. Okay, so you'll notice that this image for our story was the same slider image. So if I wanted it to be the same slider image, I can just replace it. And there it is. All right, our story. So I'm going to go back here. And they actually have a little bit about their story. I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to add this to our story. And I'm going to put everything. Actually, let me take a look at the page. It's a paragraph, and I want to break this into paragraph. So I'm going to take this and make it the first paragraph. these P's are paragraphs, right? So they're like double breaks. So I want to make sure that I drop it in there. Make sure there aren't any typos, right? And there's my indent. And then I'm going to go in and copy the second part of my page, which is right here. Copy that, minimize that. Right, so I'm reconstructing this. I added my navigation bar. I've got this thing structured better the way I want it. All right, so we've got card1.jpg, and that was something we haven't modified yet. So let's go in real quick. And I know that we're kind of banging through this, but I want to make sure that you can watch this back a little bit later. So here's our image. So I'm going to right click on this and layer from background, right? And name it card. And so now I'll have all the things I need. And so let's see if we can grab, I wish that this did not make those web. So now I got to screenshot them, which is fine, I suppose, that I have to kind of screenshot each one of these. It's fine, but I want that. What other ones do we have? Do we have any other cool images here? So let's scroll up. That one we already used. Oh, we could use this one. This would be a great one for our card. And so I'm just screenshotting this, giving myself plenty of room for my card format. All right, so let's just go and see if there's anything else image-wise that we can take. I think there's more than one bartender image, so we'll screenshot this one. All right, so I've got 3 images for my 3 cards, right? It's card 1, 2, and 3. So let's go into file open. Let's go to the desktop, and I need to grab my screenshot. So I need this one, and this one, and select all, copy, paste. Now I know I'm scaling up. I need to find bigger images in order to really make this thing sharp. But for the sake of the process, I'm just going to bring the images in that I have. And so select all, copy, paste. Card 2. Select all, copy, paste, hold down the Option key, and card 3. So now I can go in, and which one do I want to be card number 1? I think this one. So really, I'll stick with the order that I did. So hide, file, save as, save to the computer, PNG file, card1.png, file, save as, card2.png, and then turn this one on, file, save as. And this would be the same process for any pages that I'm developing inside my website. I really should have these named in a way that I can find them quickly, right? So if I was doing home and then the about page also had a gallery, right? The about page also had a gallery. And so I would have to then, and what I like to do is I'll actually name it 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll do like card about 1, 2, and 3, and card menu 1, 2, and 3, so that I still have the card as the start, and I'm just adding the page descriptor to the numbering, same numbering system. That way, when I go into my code, all I'm doing is editing the code to fit my design. And so here it is. PNG. And so I'm going to swap out the images right now, and I'm going to leave the descriptors because you're getting the idea of the process. Right? Very easy switching out. And I would even, sometimes I even just save over the top of the images that are there so that I even make the process simpler, like quicker for me. So I would even go over the top, and once I know where where the things are I'm looking for, right? And the name and the terminology used in the construction of it, I would even go in and rename, just save right over the top of, and I'm just scrolling down. So I'm showing you where that Jumbotron image is. And there's my footer. And so I'm just going to change this to stop by, or come on in, like, and my phone number. So I'm going in. Now I'm going to manipulate these background colors and a bunch of things so you can kind of see the construction of this thing. So I'm going to save that. Let's see if I don't think they have a phone number. They don't want people calling. It's like really quiet and dark in there. So I doubt they have their phone number on here. They might. Oh, they do have the phone number. Go figure. I'm going to minimize that. I might as well replace it. And we know things like, what the footer is, right? And what the body is, because that's the things that we constructed from our Web 1 class, right? These are all things that we constructed from our Web 1 class, learning the basic terminology of the top piece of bread and the bottom piece of bread, and kind of what each one of these things looks like. All right, so we're starting to get this thing constructed. So let me just see something here. Minimize this. I'm going to trash the files that I did screenshot. I'm always constantly cleaning up my desktop because I want to make sure that everything is nice and clean. I have to make sure that so let's find, oh, here's my logo. It made a copy of it. Ah, there's where the problem was. So let's trash that. And I was just problem solving because I saw that my Dreamweaver file had some different things going on. And so let's see what we have. Slider, background, amazing bartenders, craft cocktail. I know I did craft cocktail over and over again, but I was just doing kind of a filler space holder thing I had going on. This has to be refreshed is all it is. So we'll save that. And you'll notice when I click on it, see how it says rounded circle and logo? And you'll notice here, rounded circle and logo, right? Rounded circle and logo. So I'm going to scroll, stretch that up a little bit. And so I have my sources, which is my Bootstrap CSS. I have my rules and I have my properties. And so I need to stretch the global up so you can see my selectors, which are all my descriptors for all of my CSS, which is what all of these are. These are all my descriptors for all of my CSS with all of my property classifications based on what is coded in the template. So, okay, so we have this thing pretty much constructed the way that we want it. We have our carousel all set up. We have everything kind of the way we want it. So I'm going to close out of here for a second, go into our files, kind of get this thing refreshed so you can see my logo replacement there. It's got drop shadows and it has glows and all kinds of things going on that I'm not crazy about, but we'll take a look at that in a minute in our CSS, because our CSS deals with a lot of what we have going on here. Okay, all right, so we have our basic page constructed. Now, we have what's the beginning of our CSS. We have our buttons and everything set up. We have our expanded navigation. We have the things that we're working on. I'm going to go ahead and click on some of the elements here. So I'm going to scroll to the top and I'm going to click on that because you're going to notice that it says navbar, navbar light, BG light, fixed top. It has a lot of our navbar elements, and you're going to actually see them listed right here in our navigation. All of our tags, all of the things that we have labeled in our navigation bar. So I'm going to shrink this now so that you can see BG light, our navbar toggle, which is our accordion, and a lot of the elements. So let's go into our CSS designer. Let's I'm going to try to make this a little bit easier by scrolling down some of the things that we have going on here. So let's go into DOM. Let's go into BG light, which is right here, right? It's labeled there. Go into our CSS. And we're going to take a look at what we have going on currently, which is what our tab is right here, which will give our properties classifications. And you're going to notice that BG light is the color of our navbar, right? It's telling us it right here in the labels: navbar, fixed top, expand, navbar light, and BG light. So I want to go into, and you can see them here, fixed top, which means there's no pixels buffering any of the edges or margins around it. You're going to notice the value of it at 1030. BG light, I want to change the navbar color. So let me just do something. I'm going to show you some of the things that I kind of do when I'm doing different navigation structures. So you remember this little kind of limey green thing we had going on? I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to sample that lime green because I want to use a shade of that in my navigation bar. So how I like to do it. So I'm going to go in here. I think I have those seats. There they are. I'm going to open this in Photoshop. I noticed someone posted in our discussion board how you can go in and get a hex number color, kind of a library, a catalog, a palette of colors that you could use on your website. And they come in kind of pre-canned. And so it's kind of really easy to get colors that all work together. You can use your eyedropper in Photoshop, and you'll notice that it generates this little code right here. And so I'm going to see if I can't find a little shade of that limey green, which is this color right here. So I'm going to copy that hex number. And I'm going to go back into Dreamweaver, and I'm going to edit this and put in my limey green color. And you'll notice that the nav bar has now changed. So I'm going to save it. And I'll go back and forth a bunch just so that you can see the cause and effect of what I'm trying to do here. So now if I refresh it, it takes a few minutes for it to catch up. Let's get in here, make sure that our home is working. So we have our background color, we have our nav bar, we have our fixed top. So let's take a look at our nav bar here. We have that at 1 point. We have our layout as a flex. We have kind of have our wrap going on here. So BG light. We now have our background color set, which is good. It takes it a few minutes sometimes in browser world to kind of catch up on what we're doing here. So, all right, so now let's get in, and now we got to take a look at what's going on with some of our other elements. And now you're going to see that the body is the area behind all of these elements. And you see how it's black right now? Black is fine, I guess. We do have to know that our body color flows all the way behind all of these elements. So you can see all of these elements. And we'll get into removing that shadow and some of the other stuff we have going on here, but I'm going to scroll down. The reason I'm scrolling down is because I want you to see that the BG color for the body also affects the crumbs area down here, because that's all one big color. And so let's go back in to our image here and see if we can't, let's go back to Photoshop. See if we can't sample like one of these super dark browns. That came out as a little purpley, but let's just see what we can do here. And so this is really kind of process of elimination, trying to figure out what we can do to kind of tint that. Now, hopefully you can tell that that's like a deep, deep, deep kind of reddish brown now. So I'm starting to match the images with the palette. So you'll notice the image now works great behind that kind of blackish brown, because that is like a perfect match for it. And so I'm going to expand this out a little bit so we can make sure we're getting the maximum view of what we're working on here. All right, so now that was our body. And so I'm going to click on some different elements so you can see that our Jumbotron is kind of this carousel thing we've got going on here. I'm going to click on the carousel. It's got carousel caption as part of our, I got to keep expanding back and forth because I'm trying to make sure that you can see like the carousel 100% width, carousel inner 100% width. These are all classifications for the carousel that has a relative position, which means basically in the center of this body. And I'm going to keep going container fluid just to show you, as I click on these elements, they all have descriptors. And so when I click on that, you'll notice, and it's hard kind of in this kind of zoomed in area, but I'm trying to kind of bounce on a bunch of things for you so you can see where it shows it down here. Nav bar fixed top, nav bar expand LG, nav bar light, BG light for just the nav bar area. When I click on the carousel, it gives you the carousel item, div ID, which is right here, which basically gives you 100% expanded layout for the carousel, which has these 3 images in it, labeled inside of each of our classes. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. You know, remember the carousel itself is all part of the index page. And I'm going to click around and see if I can get to Jumbotron. Jumbotron is right here. And the Jumbotron has a little bit of padding around it, which you can see right there. Four, two, 4, 2, which is what that is. I'm trying to grab all of these different elements so you can kind of see what is going on in versus the body versus the basic HTML versus the container fluid, which is the huge container that we have going on here. And so I'm scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. And so now So here's our background. Our text color is white. The pizza back is the image. There are a few things I want to do before I manipulate the image in our Jumbotron. I want to see this weird shadow. I'm going to make that 0. Not a fan of the shadow. And so now it's removed the shadow from it. It doesn't matter the background because I removed the shadow, right? So I stripped all of that out of there. If it was still there, I could adjust the color and make it white or gray or whatever. I could sample in Photoshop. You'll notice that the background is a pizza back. And so let's click on this. And I think I had my green texture, right? Texture back. And so now I have my texture that I filled in behind there. Now, the background color is important, right? Because it controls the trick with the color of being white is this thing right here. And so editing that font to a different color, let's see, we have, so I've got that the way I want it, I think. And so Jumbotron has its padding. All right, so now we have a shadow around the logo. So I have a border that has this red color. I'm gonna make it white. And I'm gonna make the shadow not have a shadow. And so now the beauty about the CSS, really the designer side of things, is it allows you to kind of work in real world, kind of live view. There we go. I have my width set as thick, so it just gives it a nice thick dimension around it. And I'm looking at my code view in HTML, right? Source code, as I'm working in my CSS designer, because what I'm actually doing is I'm editing the Bootstrap and the Pizza CSS, but using my designer view in HTML source code view. So I don't have to go here to there, back to here. I'm using the editor. The reason I'm able to do that is because I know the classifications, the rules that were set up for this page based on these little tags that are attached to the shapes on the page. So if you're able to take even a WordPress site and download it off of WordPress and open up those files, or go into the CSS editor and kind of start looking for names and terminologies that match with the things you learned working in Dreamweaver, you can really quickly kind of start navigating through and editing the elements to match what you want them to match. All right, so we're continuing to scroll down a little bit. The image has been edited. I put a new thing in there. Let's see what we have. Display for and title text. So here's title text, right? Here it is. It's labeled here. It's highlighted in the selector, and it has its fields here. You'll notice it does have padding and a little bit of margin on the bottom. So we could tighten that up if we wanted to, right? We could adjust this so that it's a little tighter box. So what if I made this 10 and I made this a little bit bigger? So let's say 15, right? So I'm actually editing the code here, and I can make this. So let's make this a little bit less too. Oh. So I'm just tightening this thing up a little bit. And so, okay, so we have our font size, font weight, font family. Let's see, let's go back in and let's sample some colors again. So let's go in and I'm gonna get a little bit more of this light brown. So let's copy this. And I'm actually just using the color from their interiors. So instead of going in and finding a site that gives me color combinations, I can literally just use the color combinations that they give me. Right, center aligned. Oof. Shadow. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to remove the shadow is the shadow around the text here. And so I'm going to get in and remove. So now that we know like what we're looking for a little bit, the hunting and pecking for the CSS for a responsive site is no different than a fixed site. We just kind of got to know what we're looking for here as we kind of navigate through some of the elements. And so you'll notice the border, the background color, the box shadow here for the title text. I'm actually going to zero out all of my shadows. I don't want any shadows happening anywhere. Not around the box, not around the text. And that's all that I'm doing here. I'm just stripping out any form of shadows. And it doesn't matter the color because I'm stripping the shadows out of it. And every once in a while, I like to save it. File save. Oh, I could do a save as too, but there's no need to. So we'll just dump that in. All right, so there we go. All right, so I'm scrolling down. And you can already see the life of this thing is like really starting to take the shape of chartreuse. It's removing itself from the palette and all of the stuff that goes with. So div row, let's see what we have going on here. I'm just clicking on some of these elements so I can see what the label is for some of these things. Card box. So where's our body? Body background color. So we have that set up. So we're good there. Make sure everything is the way we want it. Fine. Inline body. Fine. All right. Scroll, scroll, scroll. And watch if I go into the pizza CSS. And you're going to see a lot of the shadows, margins set up in our, see, background image. It's all here. We just use the CSS designer to help us out. And so see card box, which is the one I just highlighted. It's kind of this weird wood beigey color. And so scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Let's just see the difference in design view, right? We get all this hokey stuff going on. So here is, so let's see. Background image, beer 3 for our Beertron. I'm just checking the CSS, right? Texture back. So our beer, I'm just going to manually adjust this to texture back also. It's the bottom of our page when you get way down here. It's going to take a few minutes to refresh, but there it is. All right, so let's scroll down. And so I know the code for this stuff now. I could see the our story, right, which is this little rectangular shape. So I could have edited it completely in CSS because I know the names of things based on clicking on my live view and seeing the code that wraps around all the elements. So I know all of this stuff. We're seeing a little different view, because I have it so compressed, because I wanted to show you the properties menu next to the CSS. And so let's see. I'm shrinking this stuff down a little bit, just so I can see. I'm going to take a look here real quick as I scroll through. All right, our article flow. I need to change this. So article flow article row is right over here, and the image is right here. I could have done it through the HTML view. I just went into Pizza CSS to see if there was anything floating out there that I wanted to edit. And I want to do texture back so that everything is the leaf texture in the background. And I actually have a really big, so you see how it looks like it's just scrolling and repeating itself? I could have made that a really big image and scrolled this thing through like everything that I have going on here. I'm just trying to set this file up, this basic file up, so that it feels color palette wise and image wise that it works, right? And I have my footer area down here. So if I scroll a little bit, so title top, yada, yada, yada. These are H2. So here's the tricky part about H2, right? H2 is my color palette for all things H2. So you'll notice here that I have white text for black backgrounds and white text for a lot of things. I do have some other colors. So that's paragraph, that's H2. And so let's go into our Bootstrap. And here's all of the color breakdowns for our fonts, our general color size. There's our article aside. And so I'm just scrolling through so I can show you. Remember, this has like 2,000 lines of code. Here's H1, H2, H3, H4. There is our background transparent, our hover colors, our text underline. I'm just scrolling through a little bit so that you can see like some of the basic stuff we have going on here. And you could do it over here too. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. These are all of our sizes. So it's set to black. A lot of these are just file sizes. I'm going to go to title. So let's go to background color. There's our font. Let's go to our H2, H1, display. All right, Bootstrap formatted to H2. We have that all set up. Let's go into Pizza here real quick because I'm going to scroll down to title. Title top, background color. Title top is red. Title head is red. All right, so let's save this. Let's do, close that. Save to Bootstrap, save to Pizza so that everything is formatted. And so now let's go back in and refresh. And so now we have everything reformatted. Pretty good for all of our, I didn't change all the text, but you get the idea. Everything has got its own little happy place now. So you click on there and you go to about, right? And nothing's there, right? I only have one page inside of my template. So now I got to start dealing with the process of generating pages, right? I got to generate more pages now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create all those pages and turn all the buttons on so that they match to the pages that I need them to. So let's go back into Dreamweaver. Let's go into files, open up our index file. And so I'm just going to scroll down to my navigation here real quick, because the next page is about, right? So I got to do a file, save as. I'm going to name it about. Remember, case sensitivity. So I saved it as about. And so now that this file is about, I need to go into my navigation bar and I need to turn on the active link. So I'm going to minimize this. I know I'm going back and forth between minimizing panels and everything, but it's a little bit easier for you to see that I need to make it nav active. So I'm going to copy this, and under about, I'm going to make this nav active, and then I'm going to remove the word active from home. So that's that. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to actually just close both of them just for a second. And I'm going to go in here. I'm going to launch this. I'm going to minimize that. And I'm going to click on about. And you're going to notice about has the dark color, and now home is gray. When I go back to home, home is black and the rest is gray. It's a really small thing, but it's a really important thing when you're structuring your responsive site correctly, so you can navigate the user through what you need the user to navigate through. So I'm going to reopen up this. And so next is our next page, right? So when we scroll down, our next one is bartender.html. And I do it in order based on an accordion navigation. So save as bartender. Make sure there's no typos. Remember case sensitivity. I'm going to save that. And so now the bartender, right? I have bartender open. I'm going to go to my navigation and I'm going to copy the active, right? Nav item active, copy that. I'm going to paste it in the bartender. And I'm going to remove active from about. So you see how I tried to fill it in? Close that. And so file, save as house rules. Remember, house rules with an S. I mean, I know it's like, oh man, right? I got to remember this stuff, but it is, typos really, really matter. So let's do house rules. It won't function if it isn't correct. All right, so house rules. And so now we need to remove the active. So I'm going to copy this, remove active from there, and paste it here. And then I'm going to save that. And then I close bartender just to make sure I'm working on it one thing at a time, and then do file, save as, and name this contact. Save it. And then I need to move house rules active. Copy that. Remove that and put the active here. Save that. And then I'm just going to close these because you'll notice that I now have this constructed correctly. right? So here's my thing. There's about is darkened, bartender, bartender is darkened, house rules is darkened, and then contact is darkened, and it works all the way back, forward, front, boom, 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 boom. So you get the idea that all of this is constructed correctly now. You also notice that this thing does expand more than my 1280 or whatever I put in there. I probably should have done about 1400 because it's fine here on down, right? But it still has a little bit of space back there. I could have bypassed that with this dark color. Let me see that. Let me just see what that looks like under the CSS. So let's go back in here. I'm going to open up index again. I got to find my gallery. So here's my gallery thing here, right? My carousel. Let's pinch this. I got to find out that color. What color did I sample there? My carousel. Let's go in here. I'm going to pinch this back in so that I can move my properties window over here. It makes it easier for you guys. There's my box size. I need my body. So is this that kind of weird? Yeah. So I need to copy this. And so the trick is going to be, body, HTML, white background, inline style, carousel. That is set. There's my image for my carousel. Set up container fluid. All right, so let's see here. dblock MX Auto. All right, everything is set up there. Let's see. So let's go over here. Article body. There's the color that I have set up in the dark. Paragraph. I'm just checking my percentages and everything here. My shades of color. Those are link colors, and you don't want to change those because blue is traditionally the color for links. So here's my caption padding in my gallery. I'm going to change that to the darker color. I'm going to save this, close that. Open this thing up. And so I have my caption background highlighted in a dark color now, so that's good. All right, here are my hover colors here, which are blue. You could change those if you wanted to. That was in our CSS area in the A. See all these grays, gray dark? Those are all our preset colors that I used. All right, so let's go to article block, body, background color white, block quote. So there's the blue. So let's see here. Do we want to make those buttons a color that matches better with our site? Let's go in here. Let's see what we can sample from. What if we do a couple of shades of green? So let's sample like that. Ooh, that's kind of an olivey, like olive color. And you're noticing now that you could search through any site now that has CSS action or activity. Here's the darker color. Let's go back in here. I'm actually going to do the opposite and lighten up some of our button hovers. And I'm just playing around. I mean, now that we have our basic structure set up here, right? Yada, 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 tab, tab, tab. And know that I'm in the CSS, whether it be Bootstrap or Pizza. And remember that dictates multiple pages. So by editing it here, I'm editing it in multiple locations. I'm not in the specific source code, which is the HTML code that gives us all of the just index.html specific content. I'm actually in the CSS now. So I can kind of mess around with the code from the back end. But now that I know what things are labeled based on clicking them in live view, I can go in here and tinker around. I can quickly go through hundreds of lines of code because I kind of already know what I'm looking for. Well, you could adjust all of your font sizes right here manually in your CSS, and it would affect all of your pages, right? Your small size could be 70% with a font weight of 300, right? Shrink it down a little bit. That's that creamy color. Block, all that means is block quotes. Image fluid means 100% the width of the container, right? Image thumbnails have a 1 pixel border of this gray, 100% width. There's our dark gray. And you can hunt and peck, trial and error, go into the CSS, whether it be Pizza or Bootstrap, and start changing colors and just refreshing your page to kind of see what happens. You don't have to be in CSS Designer. I never used it before till the last few years. I did everything in code manually. So you can see the padding on our container has a little bit of a buffer. Our media is a 540 pixel container. We have a couple of different container sizes based on the pixel density. Remember the proportion of the pixels. So based on that is the how it kind of retranslates itself in our design. So I'm just scrolling through real quick to make sure there isn't anything that I want to highlight real quick before we go to our next page. But you could be in there playing right now yourself. I mean, you can't really break it. You're editing colors and editing basic kind of where things are image-wise, swapping them out, editing text, changing colors, removing shadows. drop shadows, outer glows, that sort of thing. So I'm just making sure there isn't anything kind of in the first chunk of code here manually, but it's all listed here in the selector. I'm just taking a look at it manually because block quote's right over here, right? What I was seeing in block quote is right here. I just chose to look, right? A hover, which I changed. Figure, image with its setup there. So I'm just scrolling down. A lot of these don't matter because they're preset by the template and they're responsive, and you want to kind of keep them going. I try to stay true to a lot of it. We're going to use a template next week that's totally different, that has a totally different responsive kind of structure to it. And that's the one that we'll use next week. And we'll also use for our out of book project, our post-course project. So we'll start the construction of it next week using kind of a different thing so that I can break you out of that comfort zone of now knowing what it looks like this and getting you comfortable with the fact that this thing could change, right? This thing could change. And you should still be able to find it. All right, so we'll close that and we'll save it. And we have our index page now constructed, has all our basic stuff going on here. All right. So now we need to go into our, so let's go into, we'll do about, we'll get into our next setup of our page. So now we'll go into about, and we'll launch that. And here is where we're only going to be in the HTML side of the house, the source code side. We're not going into any of the queries, any of the style sheets, any of the JavaScript that controls like the panning of our image gallery or carousel, any of those things. Now we're specifically in our template here. And so now I just cleared out, I just deleted that circle. So you see the circle there? And so now I can expand this out because we're not in CSS anymore. I'm going to expand this out so you can see. And sometimes for live view, I mean, I could take the image out here, right? Just highlight it and get rid of it. I like to do it all in code. I will leave the spacer there just so that you can see that now, keeping in mind that this thing is built in a container structure. So I'm going to try to keep the container structure just so that there's a consistency of application. Let's see here. I'm going to copy this. And so I'm just dropping some elements in here now. And so here's my paragraph. I'm going to remove that because I don't need that in my descriptor. So you'll notice now it says the dream became a reality and there's no paragraph attached to that container. I could have adjusted that container if I wanted and added more or less text to it, but I'm trying to stay in the structure of my CSS, so I don't have to do any super editing to that for page 2. All right, so we have that. And I'm actually going to add a bunch more to her story, right? Because her story is right here. And so I need separate paragraphs. So let's see. So the first paragraph is going to be this entire chunk. Now, our template that we're going to play around with next week has multiple formats. So pages with optional multiple templates embedded already in the pages. So if we wanted this to have somewhat of a completely different look tied to our CSS, we can do that. And so next week, we're going to see how that works. I'm going to stick with the template that we have here from a general structure standpoint. That way we are consistent with how we do this. All right, so here is our divs for our row, which is right here. So it has our thumbnail, it has each of our cards, it has our buttons. And so I'm going to highlight that. And so let's just see if we get rid of that, right? That's the entire row there. And so now when we scroll down, beer selection, and our row is gone. And so now we go right into our next label. So if we needed that, if not, let's get rid of that one. And you'll notice it goes right from the story down to our footer. And so now let's save this. I'm going to close that. Minimize this for a minute. I like to make this a list. Open this thing up. So we have our index page, and we go into about, and we have just our story. And so I'm still staying within the containers that I created. I'm just making this thing fit better to the content that I'm building here. And yeah, I need to go in and do something with the gallery because you don't need a gallery on every single page. So let's close that. Let's go into, let's open the about page. Let's see. So just below our navigation is the gallery, and it's right here. And so here's our gray color for our background. We could remove this. Let's just highlight this. Carousel indicator. Slider, slider, slider. What's below our carousel? below our carousel is about. So let's go down, carousel, carousel, carousel. And so let's make sure that's highlighted. Hit delete. And we go right to about. Now, this might be a good template for some of your other pages, right? Because we have the title now. We have, let's see if there's, our story. And we might not even need this. I'm just cleaning up some of the things we have here. That's the title. And so now goes to our story. Oh, much cleaner. All right, so let's save that. And sometimes I'll go in and I'll set up kind of 2 pages with different column structure based on the original column, right? So if I launch this, and you see this is the one that has all the bells and whistles, the main story, the row with the 3 columns. And for the about, I basically kept this, right? But maybe for the bartender, I keep just this, and it's the 3 pictures of the bartenders and the descriptions below them, right? So I'm basically getting rid of a lot of the things that are unnecessary in the design based on the page, right? So now we go to this super clean, just this area of my design, and it's totally different than the home. And so let's go in now, and I'm going to minimize this. And you're getting the idea here, but I'm just constructing a few different kind of interior templates. So maybe for bartender, let's go into bartender. Let's scroll to the top. So here's all our buttons, and then directly below it is our carousel. And I'm going to do it 1 box at a time, just so that we can make sure that we get what we need. So I'm gonna, and I like to look at the view, right? So I'm scrolling up to make sure it's just that box. I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to get rid of the Jumbotron next, because I don't need our story. So I'm going to get rid of this. And so now you're going to see that I only have, here's the 3 cards. I still got to get rid of this. So let's go beyond pizza for 1, pizza for 2, yada, yada, yada. Get rid of this area here. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to scroll down just to show you that it's that container. Delete that. All right, so let's save this. Let's open up Index. All right, so we have our site built. We click on About. About is just the description. We click on Bartender, and Bartender is going to be our 3 bartenders and our descriptions below it. Close that. And just for the sake of the process, so you can see how it looks, let's open up bartender. Let's go into our page. Bartenders. Now I'm not going to switch out the three. I'm not going to switch out the three guys, but let's just do this. I think there's three. At least there should be. So there's Carlos. Actually, there's a bunch of different, I don't know what they call them, cocktailologists or something. So there's our thing. We don't need an href. It's BTN primary. So we'll clear that out. And so we'll have just our buddy number one. And so now flatbread pies. This guy. Paste that. Get his description. Now it would be cool if they had social media to like link to their LinkedIn or something, or, and remember that's an empty like anchor, right? Anchor or number sign. And that's what embeds the. All right, so let's finish the last guy. There's his description. I'm going to switch the guys out because it'll drive me crazy if I don't as part of our lecture. There's that. I'm going to remove the button, which is this link right here, right? So now all three, and actually Colin is this dude. So let's scroll back up to card number one, and it's card1.png. I need to change this guy to card1.png. And then I need to, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to print the screen. I'm going to scroll up. All right, so this is going to be card 2B. So card one's fine because I used it on the home page, but I need this one, Carlos Cabrera, to be card 2B. So let's open this up. So we'll open up card one. This is where, you know, organization. Open up card one. I'm going to open this. And I'm going to file open. Oh. This is PNG. Let's go to the desktop. This is Carlos. Select all, copy. And I know I shouldn't scale it like this, but for the sake of process and time. I'll save as, save the computer. This is card two technically, but it's card two bartender. So card two bartender. And so I need this to be card. Where is he? Card two bar bartender, card to bartender, go into Photoshop, close this screenshot, open up the other screenshot, select all, copy, paste. File, save as, PNG. And a lot of this is repetition, right? Card 3, bartender. And this was my life in the web agency. I was just naming and formatting over and over and over again. There he is. Save that. All right, open up the index file. Go to about. Good to go there. Go to bartender. Got the 3 bartenders. And house rules goes back to our standard template. And I have to tell you, the house rules are best listed like this as the about format, because it's a list of rules for the cocktail lounge. So actually the about template, the one I created here for about, see, it's fully scalable, which is beautiful. The background scales, the box scales. That's the beauty about responsiveness, right? And so it's still one clean box, right? And watch when I go to bartender, it's 3, it goes to 1 and shrinks all the way down, all scalable, all clean. And we just built upon the template that we have. So beautiful. All right, close that, minimize this. And house rules. I'm just banging through these really quickly so that you can see that once you have that template, I mean, you can really go through this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about, I'm actually going to delete house rules, and I'm going to make a copy of about and make it house rules. Because the house rules is this thing, which is just a list of rules. And so let's go back into Dreamweaver. Open up house rules. Here it is. So under our story, chartreuse, our story, let's put house rules. And of course, the image has to be replaced or removed. Like you could even just get, I like images more than text, but in theory, we could get rid of that. And it just be the house rules. And so now, copy that. All one paragraph. And I like to do things like, I like to do, sometimes I'll do space. Just as something different, right? Each one of these, relax, we ask that you have fun. Now, under here, so let's go here. I'm adding a line break. The world of knowing a little bit of HTML, right? Treat yourselves, treat others as part of. So treat others. I really do love tinkering in code. I really, really love tinkering in code. So hopefully, as part of your experience, we love. I love writing code. I love the process of this. And in theory, I could copy this now. Copy, paste that. So now you're seeing, right, page specific stuff is the HTML side. Things that dictate the overall elements of it is CSS, right? So that's what we're messing around with. We're not messing around with JavaScript because that's all our gallery menu commands and all that stuff. Please note, I don't know if that's a separate. Please report, please keep your hands. Yada, 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 yada. A lot of bullets here, but I would make it less. Some of these things that are exactly the same. They have some funny things on here too. All right, so now I have my bulleted list. And so in the course of my lecture here, I've built the CSS, I've built the template for the 5 pages. So here's our home page, right? I need to replace some of the pictures, but the about page, bartender page, and the house rules. So we are well on our way. Now, I could have done paragraph breaks and it would have really indented these things and given it extra space, right? I don't think their page is their list technically. No, it's pretty much a run-on paragraph like this thing is. I could have gone in here, right, under house rules. And did one of these bad boys. And instead of a BR, I'm not going to do them all. I'm just going to show you that I could indent this thing by doing a paragraph at the end of each one of these. Indent, indent, indent after each one of these. I'm just going to save that so that you can see. But I could have done that. I could have literally every one of these bulleted items, I could have made a modification. And remember, I can always do some basic stuff here. You're not going to see too much of this because of the format of the paragraph text. It has a specific format. So modifying that only will work if the browser defaults to a different typeface, and then it'll manipulate that. But you get the idea. All right, so let's save that and close this. So let's take a look at our Out-of-Book project, right? Where we're at with our Out-of-Book project. Now that everyone has seen CSS, everyone has seen setting up their file for 5 pages of website. Everyone's seen how to take the overall template that we have created for the pizza file and manipulate the rows, columns, and the basic div containers to remove content, to reshape content, all within the body context of our HTML, which is what we were doing. And our Out-of-Book is to add 3 more pages for a total of 5 pages. Everyone has submitted the pizza file populated with content only for the first 2 pages. Now you can go in and play around with the backgrounds. You can change some of the CSS, some of the colors, remove the glows or the shadows if you want to, modify character sizes if you want to go in and modify those, H1s through H5. You can go in and kind of make it your own, change the color palette a little bit, get it feeling a little bit more like the client that you created the first 2 pages for. Your project for Learning Module 2 is to give me the 5 pages completed, and you can submit those in our Out-of-Book 2.7. You may also give me your completed 5 pages for chapters 11 and 12. So you can give me the Out-of-Book to cover your chapter assignments, because we're doing all of our CSS editing in a responsive environment, including image manipulation, and we are covering kind of those more advanced chapters in Dreamweaver. Please make sure that you read those, because if you have questions, you're asking about certain terminology or certain processes, just make sure that you're using the correct terminology. And the book is great for reading and kind of ingesting what's going on, and then the Out-of-Book project is really good for practicing it. Their book project is fine. It's just sometimes a little bit better to have ownership in your own thing. So this week, if you finish your 5 pages in your responsive template, Dreamweaver template, you have literally completed the book projects for Learning Modules 1 and 2, and the Out-of-Book for Learning Module 1, and the Out-of-Book for Learning Module 2. So we've covered it all in one swoop, which means next week, we're going to be playing around with a completely different template. As we get into the kind of the, Web 2 level of things, students are always asking for online projects, manipulating like their own portfolio or building interactive individual pages. So I have a different template that we're going to play around with for Learning Module 3. So we'll be done with this template after this week, and you will have completed chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12, and your Out-of-Book Learning Module 1 and Out-of-Book Learning Module 2. Really good job so far in Learning Module 1. Everyone submitted their Out-of-Book template with the first 2 pages, and they looked great. Everyone did a really good job replacing the content, kind of making it their own a little bit. Now that you're able to kind of play around with the CSS, you should be able to even customize it a little bit more for your liking. So if you built the first 2 pages and you're now into the next series of pages, a really good thing to understand is if for some reason, and in this case we are doing it, we are adding to our navigation, you can actually copy, right? You can copy your navigation bar, right? You can copy this whole thing up here and you can paste it into, you can even start here if you feel more comfortable, just at the home button. And you see this LI class right here? If you copy this wherever the LI is, which is these two pages, if you add the other buttons to your index, you can actually copy this entire LI right here. Copy this. And in line 19 through 23, copy that. And then in your other pages, paste only the navigation again, right? So if you're changing or adding buttons to your navigation, you don't have to recreate your first two pages. You can copy the new added buttons. I would add them to your index page, just like we did in the lecture, and then copy this section and paste it in each one of the new pages. And that way your navigation bar is exactly the same. Remember, if you edit the CSS on the index page, that has nothing to do with the names of your buttons. That will automatically transfer over to any new pages that you create. You just need to copy the front end, this stuff right here, as you add your other pages to your index page navigation, and paste it into the same location starting at line 19 in your new pages you create, and you'll have the same navigation bar on all of your pages. Very easy, simple copy paste. So the only thing you'll have to add to your index and the second page you created for Learning Module 1 out of book is to add your extra buttons. So add it to your index and then copy the code and paste it in the about, and then create your new pages off the about page and do any content modification you need once you have your CSS dressed up just like we did. So there is one little extra step in your process because we created the first two pages for Learning Module 1, and I don't think we added all the navigation buttons that we need. If you didn't, then you need to add them on the index page right here and just copy that code. It's 2 seconds. Copy the code and paste it into any other pages you had created without the full navigation bar, without the full buttons. And then you can hit the ground running. All right, we're at about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I wanted to stay in the 2.5 hour range to open it up for you to now just play around with your code and start working on your Learning Module 2 out of book. Some students like to go back and now read the next 2 chapters just to make sure their terminology. Some students like to just jump in and build their pages and then go back and do their reading at a later time. Whatever works for you. It's about a 2.5 hour lecture, so I want to stop the recording and stop the desktop sharing and everything. And then I'll have the chat window open for a little bit if you have any questions, but let's just get in and play. If you have any questions during the week as they kind of pop up, please feel free to reach out and we'll kind of keep plugging along here. Great job so far. Keep up the very good work. And we're going to learn some more of responsive web design in Bootstrap.